The large silver doors of the Zephyrian Council chamber opened with a soft whisper. Ambassador Kethvar walked slowly into the circular room where 12 representatives from different worlds sat waiting. His long, thin fingers trembled as he held the datapad containing the worst news their peaceful federation had ever received. The chamber was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the air systems that kept the atmosphere perfect for their kind. Kethvar looked around at the faces of his fellow council members. Each one represented a world that had known only peace for over 300 years. Their planets were covered in beautiful gardens and crystal cities. Their people spent their days creating art, growing perfect foods, and studying the mysteries of the universe. They had never needed weapons or armies because they had never known war. "Fellow counselors," Kethvar began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I bring news from our outer monitoring stations. The Vorth Empire has destroyed the neutral worlds of Kellen and Theros. Their fleets are moving toward our space." A collective gasp filled the chamber. Counselor Yeth-Anna from the agricultural world of Verdania raised her delicate hand. "Surely this is some mistake. The Vorth have never shown interest in our region before. We have nothing they could want." Kethvar activated his data pad, and the holographic display in the center of the room came to life. Images of burning worlds filled the air above them. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were nothing but smoking ruins. Orbital stations that had housed millions of beings were twisted metal floating in space. The Vorth Empire does not want our resources, Kethvar explained. They want our worlds themselves. Intelligence reports indicate they consume entire star systems to fuel their war machine. They strip planets down to their cores and use the materials to build more ships and weapons. The council members looked at each other with growing fear. Their beautiful worlds with their peaceful people would be perfect targets for such a destructive force. None of them had military experience. Their patrol ships were designed to help lost travelers and monitor weather patterns, not fight wars. Counselor Zephyric from the mountain world of Altaria stood up slowly. "What do our defense forces tell us? Can we mount any resistance?" "Our combined fleets consist of 47 patrol vessels and 12 science ships," Kethvar replied. "The Vorth First Assault Fleet alone contains over 300 warships. Each one of their ships carries more firepower than our entire combined fleet." The silence that followed was deafening. They all understood what this meant. Their civilization, their way of life, everything they had built over centuries of peace was about to be destroyed. Their people would either be killed or enslaved. Their beautiful worlds would be stripped bare and left as dead rocks floating in space. "We must seek help," whispered Counselor Miravan from the ocean world of Aquatica. "Someone in the galaxy must be willing to aid us." Kethvar nodded slowly. "I have already contacted the Galactic Defense Union, the Stellar Peacekeeping Force, and the Independent Worlds Alliance. None of them are willing to risk war with the Vorth Empire. They say the cost would be too high." "Then we are lost," Zephyric said, his voice filled with despair. "Not yet," Kethvar replied. "There is one option remaining. The newcomers." Every member of the council turned to stare at him. The newcomers were a species that had only recently made contact with galactic civilization. They called themselves humans and came from a world that most civilized species refused to visit. The galactic classification system had labeled their home planet Earth as a Class 12 death world. Most species in the galaxy had evolved on peaceful worlds with gentle climates and abundant resources. Earth was different. It was a world of extreme weather, dangerous animals, and deadly natural disasters. The gravity was so strong that most galactic species could not even walk on its surface. The atmosphere contained chemicals that were toxic to many life forms. Yet somehow, humans had not only survived on this nightmare world, but had thrived. "You cannot be serious," Yathana said. "The humans are barely civilized. They only achieved space travel a few decades ago. What could they possibly do against the Vorth Empire?" "Their world has made them strong," Kethvar explained. "Reports from our first contact teams describe a species that has survived constant warfare, natural disasters, and predators that would terrify most galactic species. They have had to fight for everything they have. But they have no experience with galactic warfare," Zefrik protested. "They do not understand how things work out here." "Perhaps that is exactly what we need," Kethvar replied. "Someone who does not understand that the Vorth Empire cannot be defeated." The council debated for hours. Some argued that contacting the humans would be useless. Others worried that bringing such a violent species into their space might make things worse. But as the reports continued to come in from their monitoring stations, showing the Vorth fleet moving closer to their borders, they realized they had no choice. Far across the galaxy, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the command deck of the UES Titan, humanity's most advanced starship. The Titan was massive by human standards, over 2 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack asteroids. To Morrison, it represented the best of human engineering and the hopes of their entire species as they took their first steps into the larger galaxy. Morrison was a career military officer who had served in the Earth Defense Force for over 30 years. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, defended mining colonies from raiders, and led exploration missions to the outer planets. His weathered face showed the stress of command, but his eyes still held the determination that had made him one of Earth's most respected military leaders. Lieutenant Lisa Park approached Morrison with a concerned expression. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority transmission from an unknown source. The signal is coming from outside human space." Morrison frowned. Humanity had established contact with several alien species, but most communications were handled through diplomatic channels. Direct military contact was unusual and often meant trouble. "Put it through, Lieutenant," Morrison ordered. The main display screen flickered to life, showing the image of Ambassador Kethvar. The alien's appearance was strange to human eyes, with his tall, thin frame and large, dark eyes, but Morrison had seen enough alien species to not be surprised. "Greetings, human military commander," Kethvar began, his voice carrying through the universal translator. "I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Council. We send this message in desperate hope that your people might aid us in our darkest hour." Morrison listened carefully as Kethvar explained the situation. The peaceful Zephyrian Federation was facing complete destruction at the hands of the Vorth Empire. They had nowhere else to turn and were asking for military assistance from a species they barely knew. As the message continued, Morrison found himself thinking of his daughter Kate, safe in her dormitory at the university back on Earth. He thought of all the peaceful families on the Zephyrian worlds who were facing the same fate that Earth had narrowly avoided during its own dark periods of history. When the message ended, Morrison turned to his senior staff. "What do we know about this Vorth Empire?" "Limited intelligence, sir," replied Commander Helen Gray, the ship's tactical officer. "They appear to be a militaristic species that expands through conquest. Their technology is advanced, but not beyond our capabilities." Morrison studied the star charts showing Zephyrian space. 12 peaceful worlds, billions of innocent lives, and a species that had never known the horrors of war. The decision came easily to him. "Lieutenant Park, prepare a response," Morrison ordered. "Tell them help is on the way." The Zephyrian Council waited nervously for the human response. Ambassador Kethvar had sent their desperate plea 3 days ago, and every hour that passed brought the Vorth fleet closer to their borders. Their long-range sensors showed the enemy, ships moving steadily through space like a plague of metal locusts, consuming everything in their path. When the reply finally came, it was shorter than they had expected. The human Admiral Jake Morrison appeared on their communication screen with a grim but determined expression. "Ambassador Kethvar, this is Admiral Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. We have received your request for assistance. Help is on the way." The message was simple and direct, but it filled the council chamber with hope. Finally, someone was willing to stand with them against the Vorth Empire. Kethvar immediately began making preparations to receive their new allies. He expected perhaps a squadron of patrol ships, maybe some defensive weapons technology, or at best a small battle group that could help them evacuate their most important civilians. The first sign that human aid would be different from what they expected came from their deep space monitoring stations. Sensor operator Veldtar was working the night shift at the Outer System Detection Array when his instruments began registering impossible readings. "Supervisor Yenthak," Veldtar called out, his voice filled with confusion. "I am detecting massive gravitational distortions at the edge of our system. The readings suggest objects of enormous size dropping out of hyperspace." Yenthak rushed to the sensor station and looked at the data streams. The numbers made no sense. According to their instruments, the incoming objects were larger than their biggest space stations. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array," he ordered. "These readings must be in error." But the diagnostics showed that all systems were functioning perfectly. Whatever was approaching their system was truly massive beyond their understanding. As the objects moved closer, the sensors began to resolve individual shapes. They were ships, but ships unlike anything in the Zephyrian database. The lead vessel was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons arrays and communication towers. Behind it came a fleet of smaller ships that were still larger than anything the Zephyrians had ever built. The sensor operator counted them as they emerged from hyperspace. 37 ships in total, each one a fortress of metal and advanced technology. Captain Ryan Burke commanded the destroyer UES Lightning, one of the smaller ships in the human fleet. To him, the Lightning was a fast attack vessel designed for reconnaissance and quick strikes. To the Zephyrians watching from their monitoring stations, it registered as a Dreadnought-class warship that outmassed their largest space station. "Captain," reported Chief Engineer Amy Wells from her station in the engine room, "the local aliens are trying to scan us with some kind of primitive sensor array. Their scanning attempts are actually creating interference with our stealth systems." Burke nodded as he studied the tactical displays. The Zephyrian technology was clearly centuries behind human development. Their sensors were so basic that they could not even properly analyze human ship designs. "Reduce stealth to minimum levels," Burke ordered. "No point in hiding from sensors that cannot see us anyway." Meanwhile, Ambassador Kethvar was struggling to comprehend what his people were telling him. The humans had not sent a small support fleet. They had sent what appeared to be an entire battle armada. The lead ship alone was larger than their capital city. "Are we certain these are military vessels?" Kethvar asked his military advisor, General Kethrun. "The energy signatures suggest massive weapon systems," Kethrun replied, his voice filled with awe. "Each of those ships carries more firepower than our entire planetary defense grid." Kethvar felt a mixture of hope and terror. The humans had clearly taken their request seriously, but the scale of their response was overwhelming. These were not the peaceful explorers that first contact reports had described. These were warriors from a world that had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Morrison sent a formal request to meet with the Zephyrian leadership aboard his flagship. Kethvar agreed immediately, hoping to better understand their new allies. He boarded his personal shuttle and approached the massive human ship with extreme caution. The UES Titan dominated space around it like a metal mountain. Its hull was covered with armor plating that could withstand impacts from asteroids and cosmic debris. Weapon turrets tracked his small shuttle as it approached, each gun barrel larger than his entire vessel. When Kethvar docked with the Titan, the first thing that struck him was the artificial gravity. Human ships maintained gravity levels that matched their homeworld, and Earth's gravity was nearly 3 times stronger than what Zephyrians were accustomed to. Even with the assistance of his mobility suit, each step felt like he was carrying the weight of another person on his back. The human crew members he encountered in the corridors moved with casual ease through the crushing gravity. They were shorter and more muscular than his people, built for strength rather than grace. Their eyes held an alertness that spoke of constant vigilance, as if they expected danger around every corner. Admiral Morrison met him in the ship's main conference room, where holographic displays showed detailed tactical analyses of Vorth fleet movements, weapon capabilities, and invasion patterns. The level of detail was staggering. The humans had somehow gathered more intelligence about the Vorth Empire in 3 days than the Zephyrians had collected in months. Ambassador Kethvar, Morrison said, gesturing to a specially modified chair that could support the alien's lighter frame. "Thank you for coming aboard. I wanted to discuss our defensive strategy." Kethvar settled carefully into the chair, still struggling with the oppressive gravity. "Admiral Morrison, we are grateful for your people's willingness to help us. However, I must ask if you truly understand what you are facing. The Vorth Empire has conquered dozens of species. Their military might is legendary." Morrison studied the tactical displays for a moment before responding. "Ambassador, our preliminary analysis suggests the Vorth Empire employs standard shock tactics and orbital bombardment strategies. Nothing we have not encountered before. Standard human defensive doctrine will be sufficient to handle this threat." The word "sufficient" caused problems for Kethvar's universal translator. In Zephyrian culture, sufficient meant barely adequate, just enough to get by. He had no way of knowing that to humans, especially military humans, sufficient meant overwhelming, superiority with multiple backup plans. "Admiral," Kethvar said carefully, "perhaps you do not fully understand the scale of the threat. The Vorth First Assault Fleet contains over 300 warships." Morrison nodded. "Yes, we have that information. Our fleet will intercept them at the outer system boundary. We will not allow them to reach your inhabited worlds." Kethvar looked around the conference room at the human officers. They showed no signs of fear or concern, only professional competence. These beings from the Death World seemed to view the approaching battle as just another day at work. As the meeting continued, Kethvar began to understand that humans approached warfare very differently from other galactic species. Where most civilizations viewed military conflict as a last resort to be avoided at all costs, humans seemed to view it as a problem to be solved efficiently and thoroughly. The Zephyrians had asked for help defending their worlds. What they had received was something the galaxy had never seen before: a Deathworld species going to war, War Commander Thax Agul stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Death, and watched as his fleet approached the outer edges of Zephyrian space. Behind him, 300 Vorth warships moved in perfect formation through the darkness between stars. Each ship was a kilometer-long instrument of destruction, built for the sole purpose of conquering and consuming entire worlds. The Vorth Empire had never known defeat. For over 2 centuries, their fleets had swept across the galaxy, destroying any species that dared to resist them. They had perfected the art of warfare, turning entire star systems into resources for their ever-growing military machine. "Commander," reported his tactical officer, "our scouts have detected the presence of unknown vessels in the target system. Sensors indicate 37 ships of unknown design." Thax Agul studied the tactical display with mild interest. 37. Ships against his force of 300 seemed like poor odds for whoever was foolish enough to oppose them. Analysis of their capabilities. "Difficult to determine, Commander. Their technology appears to be using different design principles than anything in our databases. However, the size of their force suggests they pose minimal threat." The War Commander nodded. It was not unusual for dying civilizations to call for help from their allies. Usually, these desperate alliances resulted in more targets for the Vorth fleet to destroy. "Set course for the planet designated Telos Prime. We will demonstrate Vorth superiority by destroying their defenders and their world simultaneously." Aboard the UES Lightning, Captain Ryan Burke watched as his tactical display filled with red contacts representing the approaching Vorth fleet. The enemy ships were impressive in size, but their energy signatures suggested technology that was advanced yet somehow inefficient compared to human designs. "All stations report ready for combat," announced Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter from his position at the weapons console. "Missile tubes loaded, energy weapons charged, and defensive systems online." Burke studied the tactical situation. The Vorth fleet was approaching in a standard wedge formation, clearly expecting minimal resistance. Their ships moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered anything capable of fighting back effectively. "Communications, open a channel to Admiral Morrison," Burke ordered. Morrison's voice crackled over the comm system from the flagship Titan. "Lightning, you are authorized to engage targets of opportunity. Remember, we are here to protect innocent civilians. Do not let a single Vorth ship reach the inhabited planets." "Understood, Admiral," Burke replied. "Beginning attack run." The first exchange of fire shattered Vorth understanding of galactic warfare. The Vorth heavy cruiser-destroyer launched a concentrated barrage of plasma bolts at the approaching human destroyer. The weapons that had vaporized countless enemy ships struck the Lightning's hull with tremendous force. Burke felt his ship shake from the impact, but the damage reports that followed surprised even him. "Engineering report." Chief Engineer Amy Wells's voice came over the intercom with a tone of amazement. "Captain, we have minor hull scoring on Deck 7. All systems remain nominal. Whatever they hit us with, our armor absorbed it completely." On the Vorth flagship, Thax Agul stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His ship's heavy weapons, capable of cracking the hull of any known vessel, had apparently done nothing more than scratch the paint on the human ship. "Impossible," he muttered. "Increase power to maximum. Target all weapons on that vessel." The Lightning's response came in the form of a single missile fired from its forward tubes. The human weapon moved faster than anything the Vorth had ever encountered, covering the distance between ships in seconds. When it struck the destroyer, the massive Vorth cruiser simply disappeared in a ball of expanding plasma. "Direct hit," Carter reported with professional calm. "Target destroyed." Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out as human weapons encountered Vorth ships. What the humans did not realize was that most galactic species built their vessels to survive in the peaceful vacuum of space, not to withstand the kind of punishment that Deathworld engineering demanded. Every human ship was built to survive. Atmospheric entry through the crushing gravity of Earth. They were designed to withstand the constant bombardment of debris in Earth's asteroid-rich orbital space. Their hulls were reinforced to handle the massive structural stresses of operating near gas giants and in the radiation fields around Earth's sun. Commander Helen Gray aboard the heavy cruiser UES Storm watched her tactical display as Vorth ships, simply disintegrated under human firepower. The weapons originally designed to crack asteroids for mining operations were encountering hulls designed for peaceful exploration and trade. "Helm, bring us around for another pass," Gray ordered. "Weapons, target their command ships. Let's end this quickly." The Storm's main guns, powerful enough to split apart small moons, opened fire on a formation of Vorth battleships. The alien vessels, impressive as they appeared, were built with materials and techniques suited for their low-gravity homeworld. When they encountered weapons designed to operate in the harsh environment around Earth, they stood no chance. Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter, commanding a squadron of human fighters from the carrier UES Valkyrie, found himself in an almost surreal situation. His fighters, each one no larger than a shuttle, were systematically destroying Vorth ships that outmassed them by thousands to one. "This is incredible," Carter reported to his wingman. "I am not even using full power, and these things are exploding from single hits." The human fighters had been designed to operate in the dangerous space around Earth, where a collision with even a small piece of debris could be fatal. Their weapons were powerful enough to clear asteroid fields, and their armor was strong enough to survive the radiation storms that regularly swept through Earth's solar system. War Commander Thax Gull watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds were being reduced to scrap metal by an enemy that seemed invulnerable to his weapons. His tactical officers were reporting impossible things. Human ships that accelerated toward enemy fire instead of retreating, weapons that could destroy battleships with single shots, and defensive systems that could absorb the most powerful. "Attacks without damage. All ships, retreat to safe distance," Thaxagul ordered, his voice filled with panic. "Reform, and prepare for coordinated assault." But there was no safe distance. Human ships pursued the retreating Vorth vessels with relentless efficiency. The destroyers moved faster than Vorth sensors could track, while the heavy cruisers absorbed everything the enemy could throw at them and replied with devastating firepower. Admiral Morrison watched the battle from the bridge of the Titan with professional satisfaction. The engagement was proceeding exactly as human doctrine dictated. Overwhelming force applied with precision to achieve complete victory with minimal casualties. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "Vorth fleet strength is down to less than 50%. Enemy formation is breaking apart." Morrison nodded. "Signal all ships to continue pursuit. Do not allow any enemy vessel to escape and report our capabilities to their commanders." Within 4 hours of the first shot being fired, the Vorth First assault fleet had ceased to exist. 300 ships that had terrorized the galaxy for decades were nothing but expanding clouds of debris and gas. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel, and casualties were 0. As rescue shuttles searched the wreckage for survivors, Ambassador Kethvar watched the battle reports from his command center on the Zephyrian homeworld. The numbers seemed impossible. A fleet that had destroyed entire civilizations had been completely annihilated by 37 human ships. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth had produced something new, warriors who fought not for conquest but for protection, and whose strength came from a world that had forged them into something beyond the understanding of peaceful species. The news of the Battle of Telos Prime spread through galactic communication networks faster than the fastest ships could travel. Within hours, every major civilization in known space had received the impossible reports. The Vorth Empire's first assault fleet, 300 ships that had never known defeat, had been completely destroyed by an unknown species called humans. High Admiral Vextar of the Krillian Star Navy was the first major military leader to analyze the battle recordings. His people were among the oldest spacefaring races in the galaxy, with over 1,000 years of military experience. They had fought the Vorth Empire to a standstill in 3 different wars, and Vexitar understood better than most what the destruction of an entire Vorth fleet meant. He stood in his command center aboard the massive battle station Eternal Vigil, studying holographic displays that showed the tactical data from Zephyrian sensors. The recordings were limited and of poor quality, but they told a story that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Computer replay segment 7 through 12, Vextar commanded. The hologram showed human ships moving through Vorth formations like predators hunting prey. What disturbed Vextar most was not the destruction itself, but the casual efficiency with which it was carried out. The humans did not fight like desperate defenders. They fought like professionals, doing a job they had done many times before. Analysis, Vextar said to his tactical staff. The human ships demonstrate several characteristics we have never encountered, reported his chief analyst. They do not retreat when taking damage. They do not attempt to negotiate during combat. They simply advance and destroy with methodical precision. Vextar studied the energy readings from human weapons. The power levels were staggering, far beyond what should be possible for ships of their size. How do they generate such massive energy outputs? Unknown, Admiral. Their technology appears to be based on completely different design principles. Where we focus on efficiency and elegance, they seem to prioritize raw power and durability. The Galactic Commerce Union called an emergency session within days of receiving the reports. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered at the neutral station, Unity 1, to discuss the implications of humanity's demonstration of military power. The great assembly hall buzzed with nervous conversation as delegates tried to understand what this meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. Chancellor Mordek of the Altarian Republic called the session to order. Fellow beings, we are here to discuss the recent events in Zephyrian space. The reports we have received suggest that a previously unknown species has achieved a decisive military victory over the Vorth Empire. The assembly fell silent. For most galactic species, the Vorth Empire represented an unstoppable force that could only be contained, never defeated. The idea that they had been completely destroyed by newcomers was difficult to accept. I have reviewed the available data, announced Professor Lithara, the galaxy's leading expert on military technology. If these reports are accurate, the human species possesses military capabilities that exceed anything in our historical records. Their weapons appear to be hundreds of times more powerful than comparable galactic standard equipment. A representative from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance stood up. Perhaps we should consider diplomatic contact with these humans. If they truly possess such power, we should attempt to understand their intentions. Their intentions may already be clear, replied Admiral Zethkol of the Military Defense Coalition. They responded to a call for help from a peaceful species. This suggests they may be willing to use their power to protect others rather than conquer them. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Ellen Hayes was dealing with her own crisis. The revelation that humanity possessed overwhelming military superiority over galactic civilizations had prompted urgent meetings in every major government on the planet. Military leaders, scientists, and politicians were all trying to understand what this meant for humanity's future in the galaxy. "Madam President," said General Robert Chen, chairman of the Earth Defense Force, "we are receiving communications from over 30 different alien governments. Most are requesting meetings to discuss military cooperation agreements." Hayes studied the reports on her desk. Each one represented a species that had suddenly realized they wanted to be on humanity's good side. "What about the Vorth Empire themselves? They have requested immediate ceasefire negotiations," replied Secretary of State Patricia Williams. "Their messages suggest they are willing to offer significant concessions to avoid further conflict." Back in space, Admiral Morrison was receiving his own flood of communications. The UES Titan's communication array was overwhelmed with messages from alien governments, military leaders, and various galactic organizations. Most wanted to establish formal relations with humanity, while others were asking for protection against their own enemies. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Lisa Park, "we have received a priority message from Vorth High Command. They are requesting a meeting to discuss terms for ending hostilities." Morrison studied the message with interest. The Vorth Empire, which had never negotiated with anyone, was asking for peace talks after losing a single fleet. "Send a reply. Tell them we will consider negotiations after they withdraw all forces from Zephyrian space and surrounding neutral systems." The response came within hours. The Vorth agreed to all human demands and requested immediate talks. What Morrison did not know was that the Vorth Empire was in complete panic. Their military doctrine was based on the principle that overwhelming force could defeat any enemy. When they encountered an enemy that was even more overwhelming, their entire worldview collapsed. Commander Paul Wright, the Titan's intelligence officer, approached Morrison with the latest reports from deep space reconnaissance. "Admiral, our scouts are detecting massive fleet movements throughout Vorth space. It appears they are recalling all their forces from active campaigns and consolidating them for defense." Morrison nodded grimly. "How large is their total fleet? Strength?" "Intelligence estimates suggest they can field over 3,000 ships if they recall everything," Wright replied. "However, based on what we observed in the recent battle, their technology appears to be several generations behind our own." The news of Vorth fleet movement spread quickly through galactic intelligence networks. Species that had been under Vorth pressure for decades suddenly found their skies clear as enemy fleets withdrew to defend the Empire's core worlds. The power vacuum left behind created opportunities and challenges that would reshape galactic politics for generations. Ambassador Kethvar found himself in the strange position of being the most important diplomat in Zephyrian history. As the primary contact between his people and the humans, he was receiving requests for meetings from species across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to understand these mysterious Deathworlders who had casually destroyed the galaxy's most feared military force. "Ambassador," said his aide, "we have received a formal request from the Galactic Commerce Union. They wish to invite the humans to participate in the next General Assembly as honored guests." Kethvar considered this carefully. Honored guest status was usually reserved for ancient civilizations with thousands of years of galactic experience. Offering it to a species that had only recently achieved spaceflight was unprecedented. "Prepare a message to Admiral Morrison. Kethvar decided. Inform him of the invitation, and explain that this represents an extraordinary honor from the galactic community. The galaxy was learning that the humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were something new and potentially dangerous, but also something that might be willing to use their power to protect rather than destroy. The question now was what humanity would do with the fear and respect they had earned through one devastating battle. The final confrontation came 3 weeks after the destruction of the first assault fleet. Despite offers of peace talks and negotiations, the Vorth Empire had made a decision that would seal their fate. Rather than accept defeat, they chose to gather every ship in their vast fleet for one massive assault that would either restore their dominance or destroy them completely. Emperor Vorthtak himself took command of the combined fleet from aboard his personal flagship, the World Render. The massive vessel was 5 kilometers of pure destruction, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been penetrated. Around it gathered the 2nd and 3rd Assault Fleets, the Home Defense Squadron, and the Elite, Death Squadron that had never known defeat. Today we face an enemy that has humiliated our empire, Vorthtak announced to his fleet commanders. We will show the galaxy that the Vorth cannot be defeated by unknown aliens from a single backwater world. The combined Vorth fleet numbered over 1,000 ships, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Each vessel carried the fury of an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved billions of beings. This was the culmination of 2 centuries of military expansion and technological development. Admiral Morrison received the intelligence reports aboard the UES Titan with calm professionalism. The approaching Vorth force was indeed massive, but human deep space reconnaissance had provided detailed analysis of their capabilities and weaknesses. "Admiral," reported Commander Helen Gray, "enemy fleet composition includes approximately 1,000 warships of various classes. Central command ship appears to be the Emperor's personal flagship, designated World Render." Morrison studied the tactical displays showing the disposition of both fleets. The humans had been reinforced by additional ships from Earth, bringing their total force to 53 vessels. Against any other enemy in galactic history, such odds would have been considered impossible. "Signal all ships," Morrison ordered. "We will engage the enemy in deep space, away from inhabited systems. Our mission is to protect innocent lives and end this threat permanently." The human fleet moved to intercept the Vorth Armada in the empty space between star systems. What followed would be recorded by long-range sensors from dozens of civilizations and studied by military historians for centuries to come. Captain Susan Martinez commanded the heavy battleship UES Hercules, one of humanity's most powerful warships. Her vessel had been designed to operate in the dangerous space near Jupiter, where radiation levels would kill most organic life and gravitational forces could tear apart poorly built ships. "All stations report ready for combat," Martinez announced to her crew. "Remember that we are fighting to protect people who cannot protect themselves. Let's show them what humans do when innocent lives are threatened." The battle began when the Vorth fleet opened fire at maximum range with their planet-killer weapons. Beams of energy capable of sterilizing worlds struck the human formation with devastating force. The weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations met the hulls of ships built to survive in the most hostile environment in the solar system. Captain Ryan Burke, now commanding the upgraded destroyer UES Lightning, felt his ship shake as multiple heavy weapons struck his hull. "Damage report," he called out. "Minor ablative armor loss on forward sections," replied his damage control officer. "All systems operating at full capacity. The human response was swift and terrible. Ships that had been designed to crack asteroids and survive solar storms opened fire with weapons that made the Vorth armament seem primitive by comparison. The HFY Storm's main guns, powerful enough to split moons, targeted the Vorth heavy cruisers with surgical precision. Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter led his fighter squadrons into the heart of the enemy formation. His small ships moved through, the Vorth fleet like deadly insects, too fast and maneuverable for the heavy weapons designed to fight capital ships. Each human fighter carried more firepower than most galactic destroyers and was piloted by someone trained to survive in Earth's lethal orbital environment. "This is Alpha Squadron," Carter reported as his fighters tore through a formation of Vorth battleships. "Enemy vessels are breaking apart from minimal weapon impacts. Their hulls appear to be optimized for intimidation rather than actual combat effectiveness." Emperor Vorthtak watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed. The humans did not fight like any species in galactic history. Where other civilizations would retreat when faced with superior numbers, the humans advanced aggressively into the heart of his formation. "All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship," Vorthtak ordered desperately. "Destroy their command vessel, and they will lose coordination." Hundreds of Vorth ships turned their weapons on the HFY Titan. The massive human flagship disappeared in a storm of energy beams and plasma bolts that would have vaporized any known vessel. When the weapons fire cleared, the Titan emerged completely, undamaged, its hull glowing from absorbed energy. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled over the communication channels with calm authority. "All ships, execute final assault pattern. Let's end this." The human fleet moved through the Vorth formation like a force of nature. Ships built to survive the crushing gravity of gas giants and the radiation of stellar coronas encountered vessels, designed for the peaceful environments of garden worlds. The result was not a battle, but a systematic elimination of an outdated military force. Captain Martinez brought the Hercules into direct confrontation with the world render. The Emperor's flagship, Terror of 100 Worlds, fired its most powerful weapons at point-blank range. The human battleship absorbed the assault and replied with its main guns. The world render, symbol of Vorth imperial power, broke apart like a fragile toy. Emperor Vorthtak's final transmission was a message of surrender that came too late to save his fleet. 18 minutes after the first shot was fired, the Vorth Empire ceased to exist as a military power. Over 1,000 ships that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 centuries were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. In the aftermath, as human rescue ships searched for survivors among the wreckage, the galaxy watched and learned. The recordings from the battle were analyzed by every major military in known space, and the conclusions were always the same. Humanity possessed military technology that was generations ahead of anything else in the galaxy. But what impressed observers most was what happened after the battle. Every Vorth crew member who surrendered was treated with medical care and eventually repatriated to their home worlds. The humans had not come to conquer or enslave, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. Ambassador Kethvar found Admiral Morrison on the observation deck of the Titan, looking out at the debris field where an empire had died. The human leader seemed tired but satisfied with the outcome. "Admiral," Kethvar said quietly, "my people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You have saved our entire civilization." Morrison turned to face the alien diplomat. "Ambassador, you do not owe us anything. We came because it was the right thing to do. Where we come from, you help your neighbors when they are in trouble. What will happen now?" Kethvar asked. "The galaxy has seen what your people can do. Many species will be afraid." Morrison considered this carefully. Fear is not what we want. We want to be part of the galactic community, to learn from other species and share what we have learned. But we will always answer when peaceful people call for help against those who would do them harm. The news of the Vorth Empire's final defeat spread across the galaxy within days. Dozens of species that had been under Vorth oppression suddenly found themselves free. Aggressive civilizations that had been planning their own conquests suddenly discovered the value of diplomatic solutions. The galaxy had learned that Earth's children were more than just survivors of a death world. They were protectors who carried the strength of their harsh home to defend those who could not defend themselves. And in the quiet spaces between the stars, a new legend was born. When you needed help against impossible odds, you called the humans, because when Deathworlders went to war, they fought not for conquest but for justice.